Welcome everyone to Training Without Travel, IDEA software training via practical application. This webinar is part of the Training Without Travel series covering IDEA software. Today's webinar covers the IDEA basics, getting started in the basics of importing data. My name is Jim Kaplan. I'm founder and owner of AuditNet, and I'll be moderating the webinar. Joining us is Richard Cascarino, principal of Cascarino and Associates. Let me have Richard introduce himself and give you a brief overview of his background, and then I'll briefly cover some of the housekeeping items for the webinar and let Richard get right into today's material. Richard?
Thanks, Jim. As Jim said, my name is Richard Cascarino. I'm the principal of Richard Cascarino Associates. We're based in Colorado and also in Johannesburg in South Africa. So it's a switch between Steamboat Springs and Johannesburg, between the heavy snow and the heavy sunshine. My background, I've got some 30 years experience in IT audit training and consultancy. I'm a past president of the Institute of Internal Auditors here in South Africa. I'm a member of ISACA. I'm on the Board of Regents for Higher Education for the ACFE, and obviously a member of the IIA. I'm the author of, as you can see, 3 books there: Auditor's Guide to IT Auditing, Internal Auditing and Integrated Approach, and Corporate Fraud and Internal Control, a Framework for Prevention. That's my background. I've been using IDEA and before that ACL for some 15 years now, basically since they came on the market. Prior to that, I was using the predecessors, which were comparatively primitive generalized audit software. We'll take a look at all of that as we go. Just to give you some housekeeping, I'll hand you back to Jim.
Thank you, Richard. Well, I'm not going to bore you with the housekeeping details. These were sent out to you this morning. You can see the slide, but we are recording today's webinar, and you will receive a link to that recording. Additionally, because we're running under NASBA rules, you must answer the polling questions during the webinar, and CPE certificates will be sent via email to those who answer all of the polling questions, and they will be sent to the email address that you registered with GoToWebinar. You do have the opportunity to submit questions via the chat box on your screen. You should be able to follow along. We sent out the slides this morning, and we also sent out the supplemental files. So if you've got IDEA and you're running IDEA, you should be able to follow along with Richard. If GoToWebinar does stop working, you may need to close and restart. You can always dial in and listen and follow along with the handout. The next slide will have the disclaimer information. And again, I'm not going to read the disclaimer information. I'm just going to let Richard get right into today's material. Richard, it's all yours.
Thanks, Jim. Well, once again, welcome to the webinar. What we're going to be covering today is the introduction to the whole series. So it starts off with looking at what is IDEA and where it came from. Where do you start if you're starting a computer-assisted audit solution project? Where do you get the data from and how do you import it? And how do you use it for planning the overall audit? As Jim said, there will be questions as we go. That's to keep you awake and make sure that everyone's paying attention. You do have to answer them to get the NASBA recognition. You do not have to answer them correctly. It's one of these strange things that says you must give me an answer, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the correct answer. Okay, you don't lose marks if you don't get it right. So, why bother with IDEA? Where did IDEA come from? Well, it started off when we recognized the need to introduce computer-assisted audit solutions. You'll find generalized audit software variously classified as CATs, spelt with 1 T because it's computer-assisted audit tools. Sometimes it's referred to as computer-assisted audit techniques. Sometimes you see it with the 2 T's. Sometimes you'll see it as computer-assisted audit solutions. Why bother? Because these days the auditor cannot operate anywhere in the organization without walking straight into a computer somewhere. So the days of auditing around the computer are to a large extent gone. We now need to gain a great deal of credence on the information that we're looking at by auditing through the computer. We're also in a situation today that we have large volumes of data coming in from multiple locations, scattered across the world in different formats, and we need to be able to bring all of those formats together and put them into something that we can actually make sense of. Now, when you get into big data, when you're dealing with trillions of transactions, you are not going to sit down with a printout and a green pencil and go tick, 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 tick. You have to use computers to audit computers. But now we can go beyond the straightforward taking what we used to do clerically and simply computerizing that. Now we can look at not how do we get there, but what do we want to know? What do we need to know? What answers do we need to provide? And then we can look at now, where is that information to be found? Don't get me wrong, when we talk about computer-assisted audit solutions, this is not replacing the non-computer part of the audit. The auditor still has to know what it is they want to know. They have to know where that information lies. If the information lies in somebody's brain, you're going to go and interview them. You'll send them a questionnaire. If it's in documents, you're going to go and look at the documents. These days, you may be able to take the documents and scan them in and interrogate them using software. So the idea is to take your overall audit program, what it is you'll need to know and how you're going to get there, and merge software into it. Okay? It's a question of deciding where you can introduce something that will make your life easier and faster to best effect. We're not trying to do this simply to find a way of using computers. I occasionally get people who turn around and say to me, I want to buy IDEA, how do I go about it? Or can you sell me ACL? I had one client who shall remain nameless, but they were in Namibia, and they contacted ACL and they said, we'd like to buy it. ACL referred them to me, and I said to them, okay, what kind of computers do you have? They said, we don't have any computers. Okay, but what kind of computers does your company have? No, we don't have any computers. Well, why do you want to buy a computer-assisted solution? Well, everyone else has one. We thought we should as well. I said, look, once you have some computers, and once you have an IT auditor who says, I cannot do my job without going inside the box and looking at what's going on, and these are the things I need to know, then contact me, and we'll sort out your software requirements. But until you can do that, you have no justification for using CATS. You need to predefine the key control questions. What is it you need to know? Now that could be things like authorization, it could be compliance, it could be fraud prevention, it could be economy, efficiency. All of these things you could be auditing for. Based on that, there are certain things in this particular audit that you're going to need to know. Once you've sorted that out, then you can decide where will the answers lie. And if the answers lie inside the box, then we can use the technology to analyze that information to provide the answers. Advantages of computer-assisted audit solutions. Number one, they are certainly going to increase your productivity. That does not mean to say that you're going to be more productive. In some cases it means that the auditor can sit and read the newspaper when they should be working. You'll get through a lot more work a lot more quickly. It also increases the auditor's creativity. In many cases in the past, we've looked at areas and we've said, it would be nice to know these things, but there is no way of finding out. Now you can focus on what is it you want to know, and we'll figure out how to get to it later. The trick with IDEA is it has to become as second nature to you as your calculator. We all use calculators. We don't all sit with a technical reference manual for how to use a calculator. The things that you do every day, multiplication, division, subtraction, are at your fingertips. You pick it up and you use it. IDEA will become the same for you. There will be things that you do once a year. I need to find the net present value of a future annuity. Oh, how do I do that again? Let me pick up my manual from my calculator, because I don't do that every day. In the same way, there are going to be help screens, and there are going to be ways to check what it is you need to do. So we can forget about how am I going to do that, and we can focus in on what do we want to know, and then we'll figure out how to do it. We can use it with a consistent methodology. The nice thing about using computer tools is if you have a constant need, let's say for argument's sake you are in a retail environment. Now it doesn't matter if it's commercial retail or retail banking. If you have a business where the same processes are being carried out in multiple locations, then in many cases you're going to be following the same methodology when you go to audit in those multiple locations. But it's nice from an audit management perspective to know that the auditors are applying that methodology in a consistent method. IDEA. That's all very well and all very good for cats. What is IDEA? IDEA started off as interactive data extraction and analysis. Nowadays it's just IDEA. It is some 22, 23 years young. It has some limitations. It can only handle 2.1 billion records at a time. If you're using IDEA Express, then you're restricted to 100,000 records. Now 2.1 billion records is a lot. But in the case of big data, you may need more than that. So you may be restricted and have to split your data in order to carry this out. The file size that it can handle is 1.8 exabytes. That's in its current version. Now what is an exabyte? Well, we all know mega, we all know giga. The next one up from that, 1,000 giga, is a tera. 1,000 up from that is a peta, and 1,000 up from that is an exa. So we're saying that the file size is 1.8 quintillion bytes. Okay. Now, that's bigger than your hard disk by a long, long way. So it's unlikely you're going to run out of processing power. You will find that some facilities are not available in the server version of IDEA. We'll talk about server towards the end of the series. So how do we start IDEA? Well, most of you are going to have IDEA version 9, and we're going to be talking primarily about IDEA version 9, but just in case we've got some people out there with IDEA version 8, You'd start it up by going Start, Programs, Idea, and set up your working folder. Now the working folder in version 8 contains your data files, any equations, views of the data, and any import definitions for bringing it in. Okay. We'd then go into our file and set our working folder, and there's a typical working folder, the username, My Documents, IDEA Samples. Okay. That was for version 8. Version 9, you've got the slides in front of you. We can go in and we can say Start, Programs, Idea, and again we're going to be setting up our working folder. But we don't do it with File, we do it by selecting Managed Projects and then picking up whichever samples we want. Now, having said that, what will you see on the screen? Well, I'm going to jump over and show you what you would see on the screen. That is the IDEA screen. And there are 8 major areas on that screen. Over here, number 1, we have our menu bar and we have our button bar. We also have our operations over here, our operations toolbar. Number 3 is our File Explorer toolbar. So we can look within our files in different ways. We can look at file management, display files, etc. Number 4 at the bottom is our File Explorer window. So we're looking in our File Explorer. We can look in the library and look at functions, equations, exports, etc. We're going to leave it in our File Explorer at the moment. Number 5 is where the business all takes place. I'm going to open up a file just to have one up there. There's my customer database. Okay. And this is where we're actually going to do the work. Number 6, down at the bottom, you'll see we have flyout windows. So it's showing you running tasks, search results, etc. As you run your cursor over them, a window will fly out and tell you if you've done a search, here are the results. If you're running jobs, here are the tasks which you're running, etc. Number 7 gives us a status bar. It tells me I'm in Managed Project Samples, not connected to the server. I've got 341 records and I've got disk space of 164 gigs available to me. And finally over here we've got our properties. We're looking at our data. I can look at the history of that data simply by clicking on it. I can look at field statistics on the data. Now if I look at field statistics on the data, nothing happens. Why does nothing happen? Because it was waiting for me to tell it what I wanted. You'll see on the field, if I go back into my data, we've only got one numeric field, which is our credit limit. If I look at the customer number, you can see it's a character field, length 5. I've only got one numeric field, so when I look at my field statistics, it says I can have field statistics on numeric, date, or time. At the moment I'm set on numeric, I've only got the credit limit, and over here it gives me a whole pile of information about that credit limit. So there's my net value, the total value, the absolute value. If you're not familiar with absolute values, it's a statistical concept that says you take all of the positive values and all of the negative values, remove the sign and add them all up to come to a number. Okay? And that will give you the total value involved, negatives and positives within this file. It shows me I've got 341 records, I've got no zero items, I've got 21 million of positive values. You'll see that that one's lit up in blue. Because it's lit up in blue, I can click on it, and here's a little window showing up, showing these are all of the entries with a positive value in the credit limit. I'll close it down. Again, I can see the number of positive records, the number of negative records, the number of valid values, the average value, the minimum. Again, it's got a blue on it, so if I click on that, these are all of the ones with the lowest value credit limit. And you can see we've got 37 of them. If I click on the maximum, I'll say I'm done on that one. If I click on the maximum, there's only one that's sitting with that high value credit limit. Okay. Now, from there, I can save it to a separate file, I can print it, I can simply say I am done. There's the number of records with the minimum. That's the first record with the minimum. Record number of the maximum. There's a finished one, and we've only got one there. It will show us our standard deviations, sample variances, population deviations, skewness, kurtosis, etc. For those of you who are heavily into advanced statistics, you may find those useful. For most auditors, you're not going to bother. To get back to the data, I simply go across to my properties again and click on my data. Okay. I can also look at control totals, showing the net total of one specific field if I want to do reconciliation. So again, I could take that and say give me a control total on credit limit. And there's my control total on that, sitting within my properties. I can remove it. By going into my control total and simply deleting it. Or I can go to my criteria and I can create a whole pile of criteria. I can say if. So now I want to have a control total, but I don't just want a control total of my credit limit. I want to have a control total if the control value is greater than a certain amount. That editor that you see in front of you is the most powerful tool that the auditor is going to have. And we're going to use that as we go through. But in the meantime, we've taken a look at the screen, we've had a look at the areas. So that brings us to our first polling question, which is where I relax and you have to do the work. So what I'll do is I'll fire off the first polling question. And the first polling question is, CATs are required to handle all computer auditing, technical auditing only online systems, large volumes of data in multiple locations. Please select one of the answers and put your vote in now. And the votes are coming in.
And Richard, just a reminder to everybody that if you have questions, just use the chat box and those questions will appear, and I'll be monitoring those questions and passing them on to Richard. Richard should be able to see them as well, but he doesn't want to get distracted from his presentation. So
it's also nice to give me a chance to think, what the hell's the answer to that question? We have 83% of people voted. Remember, if you want to get your CPE, you have to vote. You don't have to necessarily get it right, but you do have to vote. A couple of answers still waiting. I'll give it another 10 seconds and then we'll close the poll. If you are using a tablet, you may not be able to put your answer in which case, if you wait till the end and put all of them together into one email and send them through to Jim, and he will handle the marking from that end. Okay, let me close the poll and I'll share the results with you. And you can see the bulk of people said large volumes of data in multiple location. Reason that A would not be right is that there's a lot you can do in computer auditing without actually running CATs. If, for example, I want to know what the procedures are within the organization for giving someone access to the computer's not going to tell me. The computer will tell me who has access to what. But if I want to know who's got to sign off, etc., I'm going to have to go and ask questions outside of the computer. So it's a combination of both. Okay, let's take a look at where we would actually start. We've got our data, what we would do with it. Well, probably we'd want to do some analysis on that data. So let me close down that poll and return us back to the screen. We've got a database here. It happens to be a customer database. You're going to be doing this shortly. But what kind of things would we want? Well, if we look over on the right-hand side, you'll see there's a results window. Now the results, there's nothing on it at the moment because we haven't done anything yet. But we could have results for a whole pile of analyses, and if I click on analysis to show you the kind of things that we can do, we can look at the kind of thing that auditors often want, gap detection. Once again, why would you want to know? Well, you might not want to know, but if you're looking at, for example, purchase orders, or if you're looking at check reconciliations, one of the critical things you might want to do is identify missing values in the sequence. We may be looking at a pile of data and we may wish to stratify that data. So we could go across and group the data in current database in various strata. So I could do it by country, for example. I could do summarizations. Summarize records by a key and create totals for each value of the key. I could find out how many customers and how much value is involved in each of those credit limit ranges. I can age. I can age suspense accounts. I can age invoices. I can age checks that have been issued but have not yet been deposited. I can do sampling. I can do random number sampling. I can create pivot tables. We'll do all of these functions as we go through this series. And we'll get into more classical things such as sampling, monetary unit sampling, variable sampling. For those of you who are in using IT as a fraud investigation tool, Benford's Law is a very powerful one. We'll take a look at Benford's Law. And in all cases, we can take the raw data and we can chart it. The problem with this kind of thing that we're looking at in front of us just now is if you present that to management, rows and rows and rows of numbers just confuse the issue. If you can give them a picture of what's going on, life is so much easier. So I'm going to close down my customer database and we will start a project. Where we start a project from is from our home menu, and we start off in version 9 with the Desktop Plus. Okay, and that brings us into a file or a window called the Import Assistant. Now, within the Import Assistant, we have got a whole pile of data that we can bring in. We can bring in from Advanced Record Definition, we can bring in from AS400, from DBase, from Access, from Excel, from ODBC compliant databases. We can bring them in from print reports in Adobe PDF. So if somebody sends us a report which is in PDF format, we can take that straight in, define the fields within that, and operate within that. If your company is using SAP, we can bring it in from there. We can bring it in from SAP AIS. We can bring a straightforward text file, or we can bring it in an XML format. Now, most software that's out there can produce files in one or more of those formats. So, from your perspective, we're going to kick off by selecting the project, and the project we're going to pick up is samples. You should have a project on there called samples. And when you brought that up, we can then say, okay, now we're going to bring in a file into our samples, into our project. Okay. The file I'm going to pick up, I'm going to pick up sample customers. Now, sample customers, where am I going to get it from? I can look in my samples, and I can look at my files, I can look in import, I can look in tutorials, and I don't see sample projects. Why? Because we're sitting on text. If I'm going to pick one up, let's take, for argument's sake, a Microsoft Access file. So I'll click on Microsoft Access. Now I'm going to look for that file wherever it happens to be. In this case, I'm going to pick it up from tutorial, and there's my customer database. So if I pick that one up, I can now say next. Okay. I'll repeat that. I open my project to give me somewhere to put the files, the definitions of the files. I went in on my Desktop Plus to get into my Import Assistant. Now I happen to know that the file I want is a Microsoft Access file, so I'll click on Microsoft Access. I happen to know that I left it in a project called Tutorial, and there it is down there. Okay. So if we're all there, I can say next, and it now gives me some choices. I'm looking at a database file. I'm going to pick that up, scan for the field length, scan only the first 10,000 items, output the file name, and it's going to be customer 2 in my case, because I've already got, well, I'll change it back and I'll just take it to customer. I've already got one, but this will overwrite it. Do I wish to replace them all? Yes. And there's my file. Now hopefully you should all have that same file. Okay, so now that we've got the file, there's a couple of problems with this file. First problem is it's in order of customer number. I don't really want it in customer number. I would like it in customer name. To sort it, all I need to do is click. You double click on it once and it highlights it. Double click and it puts it into that order, ascending. Double click again and it creates it descending. And over on your right hand side you'll see I've now got 3 buttons under indices. One says no index, one says last name ascending, and the other one says last name descending. And that's the index I'm in, because it's got the red tick. If I click on the last name ascending, that's taking me to it. If I take out the index, I'm back to where I started. I'm going to pick it up by country. I will create an index for country in ascending order. If I wanted just to browse this thing through based on the values, I could double click on credit limit. And there's all my low value credit limits all the way up to my high value credit limits. If I wanted to look at it the other way around, there's my low values at the bottom and my high values at the top. Now, you may say, well, that's fine, but I could do that in Excel as well. Yes, you could. But with Excel, you've actually changed the data. Here you haven't. Your data remains as it was. If I turn around and say no index, your data's gone back exactly as it was. There's a difference between indexing and sorting files. If I index a file, I create an extra file with just the index. And the index gets sorted in ascending or descending order. Now, that can be problematic. If I've got an enormous file, then to read a record, I've actually got to hit the disk twice. I've got to read the index, find out where the record is, and then jump into the file itself and find that record. So that's 2 disk IOs that I have to do. But if I have a large file with a few transactions that I need to do, indexing means that instead of hitting every single record on that huge file, I'm going to go through the records on the small index file and then jump into the ones that I'm interested in. So it can be considerably faster if you're only going to look at a few. If I'm going to look at the whole thing, then rather than doing 2 disk IOs every time, it might be worth my while to sort the file. When I sort the file, I create another copy of the actual file in that sorted order. Now, in doing that, I have to do a read and a write to the disk for every single record that's on that file. So it's not worth doing unless I'm going to be using that sorted file over and over and over and over again, in which case I only need to sort it once. And now I'm hitting the one file over and over again. The disadvantage to sorts is that I have created another file. If this is an enormous file, then I've created an enormous file twice. The original file and the sorted file. And that's going to swallow up my disk space. Okay. So when would I want to use that? Well, I could take, for example, my last name ascending and look for duplicates. So I don't see any there. I don't see any there. There's a few Chans down there. Are they the same person? Can you see the problem in going through a file like that? So rather than taking my indexed file and looking through it, we've got a computer here. Let's look for duplicates. I'm going to detect duplicates, and the criteria that I want to use, the key is going to be on my customer name, the last name, ascending. And I can give it another key. I can say the first name, ascending as well. Now to get that index, it's going to create a new index. I could build in criteria to say, give me those names if the country equals China. Or I could leave it. Let's try it first without. Okay, what is it telling me? There are no duplicates. Does that make sense? Well, we know that there were duplicate Chans, but look what we've got. We did a last name and first name. And we looked for duplicates based on last name and first name. So let me close down that duplicate. And let me go instead on my duplicate key and detect, looking for the last name only. Aha, we've got two boroughs, we've got multiple Chans, we've got a couple of Floras, some Kims, quite a few Lees, etc. We've got Lee in the US and we've got Lees in China and Lees in Korea. Maybe I want to narrow that down a bit. So I'll take out that duplicate and I'll go back into my full database and I'll repeat the exercise. I'll do a detection. My key is still going to be on my last name, but now I'm going to add the criteria. And I'm going to say I only want to see duplicates who are in country. Now I've double-clicked on there and it comes up here. Country equal to, quotes, China. I'll do that again. From inside here, there's a little button that looks like a calculator. It's called the equation editor. If you click on the equation editor, from anywhere that you come across the equation editor, it takes you into here. Down here are all of the data on the file. To bring it up to the top, I'm going to double click. If I click it once, nothing happens. If I double click, it comes up. Up here are our actions. Equals, greater than, less than, greater than or less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, exact match, and, or, not, etc. So in this case, I want it equal to China. Now we know that we're dealing with a character field, and because it's a character field, we have to put it in quotations. So I could simply type in quotation China, close quotes, or I could hit the double quotes and put in China. Helps if you spell China correctly. Okay, when I'm happy that I've got it right, I can test it and say, did I do this right? Yep, it says it's a valid equation. If I take out those quotes, you'll see China has gone red because it says this is alpha, this is alpha, but you haven't told me it's alpha, so I think it could be numeric. Let me check that again. I'll validate it. Ah, I've got a syntax error in there. And it highlights the field that's got the syntax error in it. I'll put it back into the quotes, and now it's okay again. So I'll give it a big green tick. And now it says I'm going to look for my duplicates, but only for country equal China. And there are all the Chans, Lams, Lees and Wongs in China, which are duplicates. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see there's my customer database. There's my duplicates. There's my duplicate 1. There's my duplicate 2. I'm in duplicate 2 at the moment. If I close that down, I could go into duplicate. There were no duplicates with both first and last name. If I go into duplicate 1, yes, there were. If I go into duplicate 2, yes, there were there. Now, how do I know that that's got a difference to this one? That was duplicate 1, that's duplicate 2. What made that different between the two? Well, I can have a look at the results. I can look at the history over on the right-hand side under properties. And there's my customer database. There's duplicate 2. You see we're in the file called duplicate 2. There's my duplicate key detection, and if I click on the plus, that's what we did. Okay. We said we will take the file. There are 16 records on it. It came from there. That's the file that we produced these duplicates from. That was the number of records that was in it. We used our last name ascending order, and the criteria that we used was country equal China. Now if I go into duplicate 1 and have a look at my history in duplicate 1, and look at my duplicate detection, duplicate option, output duplicate items. There's nothing in there that says criteria country equals China. There's no criteria in there at all. Okay, so you can always look. I've got a question. In the equation editor, what's the difference between equals and equals equals? Okay, let me close these two down. And let me go back in again, and we'll go into a duplicate, and we'll go in here. Okay. Up here we have equals. Now equals will say, is that equal to that? Okay. For character fields such as the first name or the country, it's case sensitive, but it will return where, for example, if I took, let me close that down 1 second. Let's see what we've got here. We've got Corrican and Cornelius. Okay. If I said duplicate key detection, and I'm looking for a duplicate on our last name, I'm going to create duplicate 3, and the criteria is going to be last name is equal to COR, close quotes. I'll check its validity. It tells me I've got a syntax error. Why? Because there are 2 close quotes. If I say give it a tick now, and I say give me an OK, there are none with COR. Okay, and the reason there are none with COR, if I go back in and look at that detection, and go in there, that equals was saying we'll return records where the text is the start of a larger word. The double equals match exact, so where the text is found as a whole word, I'll try that again, a whole word, and not at the start of a larger word. Okay. So if you like, it's not just equals, it's really and truly equals. Okay. So let's take a look at, we've looked at duplicates. Let's look at the duplicates in the same country. We can also look for duplicate credit limits if we wanted. It doesn't have to be alpha. I can go in and say that my key is going to be credit limit. And again, I don't have an index on credit limits, so it's going to build it for me. And there they are, looking for duplicates. Now remember, that big one that we had, it's not there because it's not a duplicate. Okay, there were two at 10,000, sorry, 100,000, two at 86,000, two at 64, two at 63, two at 37. There's two there, there's two there, and so on. And you can see down at the bottom the number of records on this is 299. Okay, so on credit limit there are 299 people with duplicate credit limits. We can also go into duplicate and say, show me exclusion. Okay, so I want to say credit limit. I'm going to match the credit limit, but only show me the ones I want to show. All of these, match all of these, and find me anywhere we've got duplicates but with different credit limits. Now I might not want to do that, but what I might want to do is I might want to see, show me all the customers where the customer name is the same and the invoice number is the same, or where the customer number is the same and the invoice number is not the same. Okay, so I can do all of those things simply by using that one duplicate key. I'm going to delete all the indices. So they're disappearing one by one by one by one. And I'm going to delete those files. Now if I try and delete that file, it says it can't be deleted because it's already open. So it tries to protect you from your own mistakes. It doesn't always succeed. Okay, let's do another analysis. Let's take our customer database, and this time we're going to go and we're going to do a summarization. And I want to summarize by credit limit. And the field I'm going to add up is going to be the credit limit. Okay. Now, I can get various statistics to come out. I can create a database, and I'm going to create one, and it's going to be the high value. I'm not going to create it with any criteria. I'm just saying go ahead and look for a summarization. And there you can see there's the credit limit, $2,000. We've got 37 records with it, with a total of 74,000 involved there. And if I go all the way down to the bottom, there's our 3.9 million. We've only got one record. Again, all of these ones that are blued, if I take that 86,000 and I click on the two, these are the two that fit into the 86,000 category. Okay, happy. Good. because once again, it's time for me to relax and for you to go into the second poll. Back to the audience doing, I love these ones where the audience has to do all the work. Existing projects may be accessed via Project Overview, Select, Create, or Properties. If you have a brand new one, what are you going to do? I didn't specifically tell you. This is one you need to think on. If in doubt, just run your cursor across the top of them. It's in your home. You've got Project Overview, Create, Select, and Properties. And we're looking for existing projects. Okay, give it a couple of more seconds for people to get the final vote in. We'll close the poll and share the results. Okay, now remember what the question was. Question was, attendees are viewing the poll results. Question was, existing projects may be accessed via. If we look back, I'll hide the poll results. So we can all go back to the same screen. Project Overview, some of you were saying Project Overview. All Project Overview is going to give you is looking at different projects. Here is the overview of the project. It's going to show you the graphics, it's going to show you filters, it's going to show you the tables, etc. And it's processing a whole pile of information on that. And that's a nice graphic showing me all of the files inside there. And I can look through it all, and I can look across it and see what's connected to what and how was it done. But it's not telling me an awful lot about how to get one. Okay. To create a new project, I'm going to click on Create. To select an existing project, I'm going to click on Select. If I want to change the properties, I'm going to click on Properties. And I can change properties for a given project. Okay. Happy. So we brought in our file, we brought in our customer database. Okay. If we look at what you see on the screen, we can change what the layout looks like. If, for example, I don't want this by customer, I could say, okay, I will go and pick it up invoiced by let me pull that out. Invoiced by credit limit, I'll go and pick it up by last name, and that's fine. in as far as it goes, but it doesn't go terribly far because there's all of my A's. I would rather have that along there. I can pick it up, hold it down, and just pull it across. Now, if I hold it down, you'll see that there's a red line moves. As it's moving, there's a red line. If I take it across, the red line is always to the left-hand side of the column. If I take the first name, highlight the column, and click on it and drag it, I will move it. If, on the other hand, I click and drag, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to highlight several, which I can then click and drag. So, for example, I could highlight credit limit and highlight status as well, and then click and drag both of those, or not. Now, once again, you're not changing the data. You're changing what the data looks like on this screen. And this is one of the strengths of using computer-assisted audit tools. You can do it without messing up the data overall. Okay. In the same way as changing all of those, I'll take the customer number and put it back where it was. But in the same way as changing all of those, I can change the length. I can shrink it down. And you can see what happens if you shrink it too small. It's going to go to multiple lines. If it's a numeric field and you shrink it too small, it's going to give you hash signs that tells you you've got a numeric here that's too big to fit in what you've got on the screen. Now, once again, it's not changing the data. It's only changing what it looks like on the screen. Okay. Happy. We'll have a look at our field statistics. Now, if you haven't got field statistics, when you click on that, it will come up and say there aren't any. Do you want some? The answer is yes. From our perspective, these are some of the critical areas we want to look at. We want to look at the number of records, the average value, etc. From your perspective, you can click on the ones in blue, and so on. Okay. This is repeating what you've already done, but it's there in the slides so that at a future stage, if you think, how the hell did I do that? You can always go back and have a look at the slides again. Okay. Let's take a look at picking a sample. We've got all of our data here, but I don't necessarily want to look at all of it. So I'll go into analysis. And I want to do some sampling. So I can go in my properties window, I can look at my data. I've gone into this and I'm looking under sample, and I'm going to go to random. I was in field statistics. To get back, I just jumped straight back into data. Now I can go to my random sample. Question, how many do I want to select? Well, in this case, we'll take 10. Now, the reason I'm taking 10 is because me personally, the auditor, decided I wanted to look at 10. Okay, you've got to be very careful, and we'll talk a lot more about it on one of the later webinars. When you are going to use sampling, there's two basic kinds of sampling: statistical sampling and non-statistical sampling. Statistical sampling, to be valid, has to follow a specific pattern where we can decide in conjunction with the auditee, how accurate do we need to be? How sure do I need to be? What is the maximum tolerable error before we start firing people? What is the expected error rate in a population? Once we've sorted that, we can plug and chug it into a formula, and it will tell you how many to look at, and it can even tell you which ones to look at. But as soon as I say, I believe that I need to look at 10, 15, 20, 30, this is not statistical sampling. This is judgmental sampling. I am using my judgment to say I want to look at 10. Okay? And it doesn't matter how random you are in your selection. You are not statistically valid in what you're doing. So what you are doing cannot be made statistically valid simply by selecting randomly. Okay. Now, why would you use one rather than the other? Where I want to look at a few and draw conclusions about many, I have no choice. I have to do statistical sampling. Where I want to look at a few and judge and draw conclusions about the few, then I can use judgmental sampling. So if I have a population and I want to look at 10 and draw conclusions about those 10, then there's no reason why I couldn't do this. I'm going to give it the file name, and I'm going to call it sample of customers. Fields, I'm going to select the fields I want output, and in this case I'll take them all, so I'm quite happy. So I'll say OK. You'll see there's a random number seed. Okay, starting at record number 1, ending record number 341. Okay, that random number seed, I can change that. The only thing that is there for is that any other auditor doing it with 10 from 1 to 341, starting with that same random number seed, would pick exactly the same 10. In other words, it's reproducible results. When I click on OK, there's my sample of customers file, and there's the 10 it's selected for me to go and check. Okay. So that being the case, let's go and have a look at our next polling question. Polling question number 3. Polling question number 3 says, files can be added via Project Overview, File Explorer, Desktop Project, Desktop Plus. How do you add a file into this project? We've done it already. We're almost there. Okay. Let me close that down and share the results. We're sitting with 91% saying Desktop Plus. Okay. Okay, so the question I've got that's just come in, so the random number seed is used just to replicate the random results previously obtained. It's not just to do that. The random number seed is what makes the selection random. Okay, it runs it through an algorithm, and it says starting with that, now run through and pick 10 records using that as a seed key into a random number generator. Okay? If you start with the same seed key, you're going to end up with the same numbers. If you start with a different seed key, you'll end up with the different numbers. But it's the seed key and the algorithm that make it statistically valid in the selection. Random selection is needed if you are doing statistical sampling. Okay? The stat sampling part is in the calculation of how many do you need to look at. Having decided I need to look at 75, to keep that statistically valid, each item in the population has to have an equal chance of being selected, and that's where the random selection comes in, to give each one an equal chance of being selected. Now you may have seen on that, let me close this down and show you where we're at. If I go back in, remember when we did a random selection, it gave me an option of allowing duplicate records. Now, an incident in my early life. When I was a child, I was at a Christmas party and my father bought me a raffle ticket and I won the first prize, which is wonderful, except for one thing. The first prize was a bottle of whiskey, and at the age of 7 I didn't drink whiskey. But the second prize was a box of chocolates, and I did eat chocolates. And I was highly indignant because when I won the first prize, they took my ticket out. They didn't put it back. Everyone else had the chance to win my bottle of whiskey, but I then didn't have a chance to win the box of chocolates. And I thought that was very unfair. As it turned out, I did a swap with my father. He got the whiskey, I got a box of chocolates. But that's sampling without replacement. Now, when we audit as auditors, normally, we sample without replacement. We'll take one out of the population, which means the next time you pick one, instead of picking one out of 340, you're now picking one out of 339. The next time it's one out of 338. So the probability of a particular item being selected is changing all the time. And that's known as the degree of freedom. If you take one item out of the population, you're working with a degree of freedom of 1. If you have a large population, it's no big deal. Okay? The difference between a probability of selection of 1 in 5,000 and 1 in 5,001 is negligible. The difference between 1 in 10 and 1 in 9 is considerable. So we tend to assume, we make huge assumptions when we're doing stat sampling. And the first one is we assume that we're dealing with a random population in its distribution. And therefore everything else that we do from there on is valid. Okay, that was picking in an access file. That's the easy one. Let's pick in one of the hard ones. So we want to import a file. How do we do it? We go back to our home and we do Desktop Plus. Okay. And this time we're going to pick up a text file. And the text file will again be sitting in our tutorial file, tutorial folder. And the file that we're looking for is sales, sales.txt. Okay? So it's in our tutorial file, sales.txt. Now, what IDEA has done is it's looked at the file and it says, well, to me, this thing looks like it's fixed length. It looks to me like it's alpha and it's numeric. It's an ASCII file. Now, Files that are coming in from PCs follow ASCII configuration. If it's coming in from a mainframe, it typically comes in as an IDEABasics file. If I change this into an IDEABasics file, if you try and read an ASCII file as if it was an IDEABasics file, that's what it will look like. On the other hand, if you try and read an IDEABasics file as an ASCII file, it will also look like that. So as soon as you see that, you know it's got it wrong somehow. So this is a fixed length file. That's fine. If I said I wanted to change the file length, there's the decimal place, comma separator, etc. This is a fixed length file. The record length is 42. Okay? Life, the universe, and everything. The answer is 42. If I change that, now this is a guess from IDEA. Based on all of the information, it looks like it's 42. If I happen to know it's not 42, it's 41, I can bring it down. Now, you'll see what happens if you get it wrong. We're getting angles. If I put it back to 42, we're getting vertical columns. If I put it to 43, we're getting slants the other way. It's not a cast iron guarantee, but if the data you're looking at looks as though it's in vertical columns, it's probably right. Okay, so now we've got to tell it what this data looks like. And that means we have to have the file layout. So I'm typically going to have to go to IT and ask them for the file layout of this particular file. And I'll tell it next. Now what it's done is it's trying to figure out where each file begins and ends. Sometimes it gets it right, sometimes it gets it wrong. You'll see that there's a vertical line between the 1 and the 0. Now that line is actually in the wrong place. So what I can do, if I move my cursor across it, you'll see it highlights as I cross it. If I double click, it's gone. If I single click, it's back. I want to get rid of that one, so I'll double click. The first field is my invoice number, and it's 7 characters long, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's where it is. 100 or 14047. The next field is my transaction date. Now once again it's put a vertical line in there. I don't want that. I'll take it out. And there's my date, 2006-07-21. Fine. There's my payment type, which is 4 digits. I'm happy with that. The next 3 digits is a salesman, 101. So I need an extra line in there, and if I simply click, I put the extra line in. My customer number comes next, and that's 6 characters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Aha. I've got a problem because again I'm missing a line. 212540. I need something in here. So I'll put that one in, and the next 2 digits are my product code, so I need to take that line out and put it in there. Or in this case, I'm happy with it because that is in the wrong place. And it's a very easy thing to do. You get given a layout, you've got the layout in your handouts, you get given the layout, but you look at it and you get it wrong. That should be 5 digits for our customer number, not 6. So it's not the 5 that's in the wrong place, it's that line that's in the wrong place. It needs to be in there. Okay, let me give you an example. There's a friend of mine in the UK who was doing some work for his company, and he was looking at employees in our Irish office. and he wanted to know how many males and how many females they had within the Irish office. Now, he got the file layout, and the file layout said that the first 3 digits were the department, the next 4 digits were the employee number, the next 20 digits were the employee name, and the next digit was the sex code, M or F. So he said, fine, I will set up my layout that way, and I will do an interrogation. How many people do we have who are F? None. Oh, I know what's wrong. How many people are capital F? None. How many people are M? None. Capital M? None. So we don't actually have any employees at all. Well, who the hell do we have? So who has anything in that field? And he found that there was one person had a G in that field. So they're not male, they're not female, they're G. Come on, what's wrong here? And he went back to IT and spoke to them. What he discovered was that the surname was 20 digits. And that was fine until they employed a new employee, Seamus O'Shaughnessy McGurk. And you couldn't fit O'Shaughnessy McGurk into 20 digits. So they increased the field length to 30 digits, which meant the sex code was now 10 digits further to the right. And the only one that had anything in that position was McGurk, and it was a G from the O'Shaughnessy McGurk. So be very careful when you get file layouts. Make sure that you are looking at what you think you're looking at. So now we've got it right, we can go to the next slide, or we can go to the next field. And now it's trying to define it, and it says my first field is num1. Well, it's not num1. First field is our invoice number. So I'm going to change that. I'm going to put in INV number. It's numeric, which is fine. It doesn't have any decimal places, which is fine. I'll move to the next one. Now the next one, it says is character, and it says it's character 2. It's not a character, it's a date. It's our transaction date. Whoops. Transaction date. And it's not a transaction, a character file, it's a date field. So if I go down to date, I can click on date. And it says, what kind of date is it? Year, year, month, month, day, day. Well, we know that it's year, 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 month, month, day, day. So it's year, 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 month, month, day, day. The next field we know is our pay type. It is character, so we're happy with that one. The next one is our salesman. And we're happy with that. It is numeric. There are no decimal places. The next one is our customer number. Customer number is also numeric with no decimal places. The next one is our product code. But it's not numeric. The fact that it says 05 doesn't mean it's numeric. The fact that you wish it was numeric doesn't make it numeric. It is what you were given. And if they gave you alpha, alpha is what you've got. So now we have to tell it this is not numeric, it's not date, it's not an ACPAC number, it's not an ACPAC date, it's not Benford date, it's not any of these, it's character. And the final one is our amount. It is numeric. It does have 2 decimal places. And you can see in the data it does have 2 decimal places. When I'm happy with all of that, I can say next. I can add one or more fields to the importing file. I can add a field that says, for example, next year's credit equals this year's credit plus 10%. It's a field that doesn't exist on the file, but I'm going to create it as a virtual field. In this case, I'm not. I'm just going to say next. I can limit it using my equation editor. I don't want to. I'll just say OK. And I'm happy. I'm going to call sales transactions. Or anything you want. And then I'll say finish. In my case, it already exists. Do I want to replace it? Yep. And there's my transactions file, my sales transactions file. Okay. If you make a mistake, you can always go back and modify a field. You can add a new field. You can remove a field, or you can find the field that you're looking for. Okay, simply by going into data. Okay. So we're happy. If I look at it from here now, and I say, okay, let me look at the field statistics. Statistics are not available for all fields. Do I wish to create statistics for all fields without statistics? Yes. And then we have it numeric. We've got invoice number, salesman, customer number, amount. I'm not really all that interested in getting statistics on invoice numbers or on salesman or on customer numbers. I'm really only interested in the amount. I can look at the dates and it will show me how many date fields, what's the earliest, what's the latest, what's the most common day, Saturday, what's the most common month, July, how many items went through in January, February, etc. I can see that in July, 161 transactions went through in July. That's obviously our busiest month for whatever reason. And again, I can go back into my data. Okay. Happy so far? No hands went up, so I'll assume that the answer to that is yes. Taking my sales transaction data. Again, I can go into my Analyze, and again, I can go into Summarization. On this case, I want to summarize by customer number, and I want to add up the total amount for those customers. I'm going to create a database, and I'm going to call it Summarize Transactions. I'm going to use quick summarization because I'm only summarizing on one thing. If I take that off, you'll see I've got a then by. So it's by customer, then by that, then by that, then by that. In this case, I only want it based on customer, so I can take that off and say just do it for one. If I say OK, there's my summarized transactions. So it's now showing me for customer number that. I've got these. If I look at customer number, the 11th one down, customer number 10201, that's their total transactions. If I want to see what they are, it's in blue. I can click on it. And I can see what they've been buying. Product code 5, product code 4, all dealing with the same salesman, etc. And I could print that out, or I can simply say done. Okay. I've got the summarized data. I can also go and get the field statistics on that. How do we do that again? It's over there where it says field statistics. Create them. And there we have it, customer number, number of records, amount, etc. Go back to my data, and I'll go back to my data. Now I can go into any of these and simply right-click it and say, okay, show me the statistics. Okay, show me the field statistics, and I can select which ones I'm interested in for that particular record. Net value, absolute value, whatever it happens to be. You'll notice that all the date ones were grayed out because I was in the summary. If I went in here and said, okay, I want to have a look at field statistics on that, you'll see that also all of the date fields, items in January, February, etc., for just that one record. Okay. What else can we do? Well, we've done our summarization. I can also go in and say I want to do some analysis from a stratification perspective. Okay, now the question is, what do I want to stratify? Well, I want to stratify based on the amount summary. Oh, we don't have that. Why don't we have it? Because I'm in the wrong file. I'm in the sales transactions. To get to the summarized one, I'll simply double click on it and I brought it back up, spelt wrongly, but never mind. Okay, so from here I can now say I want to go and do my stratification, and I want to stratify based on the account sum, sorry, the amount sum, and the fields I want to include are I want to total on the number of records. Now, up here it's showing the increment. So I'm going to change that from 10,000 down to 5,000. Okay? And if I click on upper limit, it's going to show me that my first strata will be from a credit limit from 0, so not credit limit, an amount summary from 0 to 5,000. And if I simply pull that down, I'll get 5 to 10, 10 to 15, and I can pull it down. Once I've got to 25, then I'm going to change that to 25,000 instead of 5,000. Increment in 25,000, and then I'll take that down from there, which is now 25,000 to 50, and I'll take it down to 200,000. And if I say OK, what did I not do? I did not tell it where I wanted the results. So I want the summary, the amount, number of records, number of records in, make that 5,000. Take the first 5 at 5,000. Can you see it's very simple? If you get it wrong, just to go back and redo it. I can take that one and remove it. The result name is going to be numeric stratification. Numeric stratification, and I'm going to tell it to go create a database. Because I hadn't told it to create a database. Okay. And now there are my strata from 0 to 5,000, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, and there's a number of records in each. And once again, I can click on that to see what the detail is inside that. I can say I want to look at those records, extract them, display field statistics. Those are the 3 records that go to fit that. I can look at them graphically, and it's now showing me that way. I can change the graph. I can do all kinds of wonderful things with it. Okay, so where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us approximately at another pole. And the pole is looking at field statistics. Field statistics are available for what? All values, numerical values, date values, time values, only which? Almost finished. %. Another 10 seconds. Remember, to get your CPE, you have to vote. Which means if I've put you to sleep, you have to wake up at this point. And we'll close the poll and share the results. And the results are showing 80% picked all values, 20% had numerical values only. Remember, when you went into field statistics, you could have numerical values, date values, whatever. So you could have statistics on them all. Okay, so when you're using your cats, remember, what are you trying to achieve? You're trying to establish the prime area for control. You're looking for controls, preferably that will cover several areas. And you're looking for controls which only apply in that particular area. You're looking for controls which provide evidence. And that's the tricky one, because many of the controls that you're going to come across as auditors are preventative controls. And generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, preventative controls do not provide evidence. You need to look for detective controls that will leave behind the evidence. The key in the lock is a very effective control, but it's a preventative control. It does not tell you who unlocked the door. We need a different type of control that will leave the evidence. And if you're going to run cats, that's what you're looking for. You'll see on the screen it says, do not try to prove a negative. Auditors love to hedge their bets. So we will go in and say things like, no evidence was found of irregularities. Now, what are you saying? There was evidence there, but we didn't find it. There might have been evidence there, but we're not competent and couldn't find it. Or are you trying to say there were no irregularities? We examined all the appropriate evidence and there were no irregularities. So try not to prove there's nothing wrong because something's missing. Evidence is missing. Our primary areas of concerns when we're dealing with this lot: complex systems cannot be recreated manually. If something goes wrong, you're in deep doo-doo. And for many organizations these days, there are no clerical records to check. There are no printouts to check. And the computer records that are there are intelligible only to computers. Okay. Now, most systems allow multiple access even if you're dealing in the cloud. You can run across the problem of the computers can be trusted syndrome. Many years ago, when I first came to South Africa, I arrived 4 months before the end of the financial year. In the 4 months, I earned 11,111 rands. The taxman sent me a bill for 17,000 rands. I said, it can't be 17,000, that's more than I earned. No, sir, this came out the computer, computers don't make mistakes. I think you've got to be joking. No, sir, it's definitely right, computers don't make mistakes. I said, have you got the clerical records? Yes. Bring them. Fine. I said, now, if you look at the tax paid and you look at the amount earned, you'll see that the amount earned that your computer's got, I will guarantee, is 111,110 rands. That's correct, sir. I said, now if you look at the clerical records that you put it in from, you'll see it's 11,000. Oh yes, so it is. I said, so the computer's done it correctly, but what went in was rubbish. Therefore what came out is rubbish. Oh yes, I see what's happened, sir. Yes, it's way overcalculated the tax due. I said, exactly. Can I leave it with you? Yes, sir, just leave it with me. Just pay the amount due and then we will refund it to you in due time. You've got no chance. So computers can be trusted. The user management has to have a degree of skepticism when they're looking at what comes out of those computer systems. And so does the auditor. There's an old saying in computers that to err is human. To really screw it up, you need a computer. When we talk disasters, we mean disasters. We mean going out of business disasters. So we need to ensure that the internal controls to stop that happening work. We need to look at the CAT types and the different types that we could use, because not all application audit tools are CATs. A CAT is simply any tangible aid that assists the auditor. And that could be a tool to get information out, a tool to test the controls and evaluate their effectiveness, a tool to verify that the controls actually exist or function as intended. And some of them will be automated and some of them will not. As far as the will nots are concerned, for getting information, we've got interviews. How are you going to know where to look? You're going to have to go and ask people. How do you know what will be a problem? You're going to have to go and ask people. You can send them questionnaires to get consensus of opinion. You can run analytical audit flowcharts. Where I need to do that, I tend to use Visio, the Microsoft product, to draw my flowcharts. It's not essential. You can use other things. You can buy flowcharting software, flowcharting 3, etc. You can do reviews of documentation. Now those could be reviews of written documentation, which means you're sitting going through manual after manual after manual, or it could be reviews of PDFs where you're using hypertext searching to find the things which are of critical importance. If we're doing control evaluation, you can be doing application control matrices, looking at components and concerns to ascertain whether the control environment, if functioning as intended, is either adequate or inadequate. not part of this particular course. We cover it on the IT auditing course series. Control verification, you can still audit around the computer and get away with it to a certain extent. But if you have to go through the computer, you can do it in different ways. We can use test data, where if we know that 2 plus 2 is supposed to equal 4, we put in a 2, we put in a 2, and see if a 4 comes out. We can reperform key functions, normally calculations. We can reprocess selected items. As far as using CATs themselves are concerned, there are different types of CATs that you can get. You can get test data generators. One of the big problems with test data is how much testing is enough. And if you're going to sit down and write test data after test data after test data to try every possible logical path through a program, you're going to be there forever. So these days, you can get a test data generator that will look at your database, will look at how it's structured, and will produce test data for you. You can get flowcharting packages. You can get specialized audit software. Specialized audit software is software that's designed to do specific tasks in specific environments. So you get banking audit software, you get insurance audit software, you get fraud audit software, you get HR audit software. You get a whole pile of software that came with the box, which was never intended for auditor use, but the auditor can use them. The standard utilities, backup, copy, print, sort, they all came with the machine. And I've seen auditors go out and buy audit software to interrogate the machine to find out if a file existed on the computer. What's wrong with find, search, locate, depending on which software you're using? Then we have our generalized audit software. And generalized audit software are the ACLs, the IDEAs of this world, which come with pre-built audit tests. Now, I hear people turning around and asking me these days, what can IDEA do that you can't do in Excel? And the answer is very little. But you can do it in 5 minutes in IDEA when you know your way around it, and it might take you 2 days to do it in Excel. Let me put it to you this way. Microsoft's internal audit function went out and bought generalized audit software, which was not a Microsoft product. And if you work for Microsoft and you want to buy something that's not Microsoft, you better have a damn good business case. And that brings us to our next polling question. And our next polling question is looking at the types of audit software. It says CAT types consist of generalized audit software, tools to evaluate controls, questionnaires, any tangible aid that assists the auditor. I'll give the opportunity to think about it. You'll notice there isn't one that says all of the above, and there isn't one that says none of the above. And once again, you don't have to get them right, but you do have to vote. It's the only way I can be sure that I've not put you to sleep yet. Another 10 seconds. And we'll close the poll. and share the results. Bulk of people went for any tangible aid that assists the auditor, and that's generally correct. Generalized audit software, yes, it's a CAT type. Tools to evaluate controls, yes, it's a CAT type. But generally speaking, it's anything that you can use to help you. And the reason it's not just generalized audit software is because there's also, for example, specialized audit software. Specialized audit software you can either write or cause to be written. Okay? So you may, I was saying, what can you do in IDEA that you can't do in Excel? There's nothing you can do in IDEA that you can't do in any programming language, because IDEA was written in a programming language. So you can get, if you're a programmer, you can write your own software, or you can get someone else to write it for you, and it will do exactly what you think it will do. But it's going to be expensive. It's high cost to develop and high cost to maintain, because you may use this once and then throw it away. It requires specific IS skills. You have to be able to program in that particular programming language, or if someone else is doing it for you, you have to be able to verify that it is doing what you think it's doing, and it's not doing anything that you don't know about. And that means you require the IS skills for that. And as I say, a high degree of obsolescence if you're only going to do this audit once. Generalized audit software, on the other hand, as I say, prefabricated tests, because they're prefabricated, each use is a one-off. Use once, throw away, because it takes you seconds to do it. You have direct control over it, and you do not have to be a computer expert to write these programs. That means that the development cost is much lower because you are a very expensive resource. It's fast to develop, it's fast to implement. We can use them for detective examination of files to find out how many, who's doing what, when, how did they do it. We can verify processing controls. We can use techniques like integrated test facilities, we'll talk about those in a later webinar, to actually reproduce what is supposed to be happening in the computer and then do a parallel run. We can do direct interrogations of files, and you can do management inquiries, the kind of thing that managers want to know. Be careful. I did have one friend who was the head of internal audit for a car manufacturing company, and I knew that he had a certain number of copies of the software, and all of a sudden I saw an order come through to quadruple the number. So I phoned him and I said, "Hey Carl, what's happening? Have you got a whole pile of new auditors?" He said, "No, we got fed up with management." Because management would go to IT and say, "Can you tell us how, whatever?" And IT would say, "Yes, we can write a program for that, and it will take about 2 weeks from the time we've tested it, and it will fit in here in our priority list, and it's going to cost you this." So they came to audit and said, "We'd like to know how many left-handed, red-headed plumbers were in the apprenticeship scheme in 1962. And audit would take the software and go and do it for them. And they'd say, "Good, can you do that for me every week from now on?" So they got fed up and they bought the extra copies and said to management, "No, but here's the software, you go and do it." Because these audit tools are incredibly powerful management tools. They are data mining tools. And that's what a lot of management needs to do. You get different types of software. You get program generators, macro languages, audit-specific tools, data downloaders. The standard stuff that came with the PC, MS Office, is a very powerful CAT in various forms. What are we going to use it for? We can access our files. We can do arithmetics. We can do logic, if, else, then, but. We can handle records of all sizes and varieties, variable length. We can update. Now, I said to you, you cannot update the data file. You can't update the data file from IDEA. You can update a copy of the data file, which you will then retain for future trend analysis, for example. We can output to screen, we can output to printer, we can output to disk, we can output to anywhere we choose. We can do statistical analysis, we can do file comparisons, and we can do all kinds of fancy graphics. We can also do another polling question. And you'll be glad to know that this is your last polling question for this session. Polling question: detective examinations normally involve generalized audit software, specialized audit software, data downloaders, microbase software. Once again, we don't have all of the above, and we don't have none of the above. And still the votes are coming in. It's a bit like election night. We're watching the swingometer to see what the trend in voting is. It's kind of sneaky. We've got 100% vote. Strictly speaking, the answer should be all of the above. But we're talking about normally. And normally for the auditor, we would use our generalized audit software, which is why this course is on a generalized audit software package. The trick is knowing what you want to know. So how do you determine the appropriate CAT? That depends on your audit objective, and it depends on the selected audit technique. Are you trying to verify the processing or verify the results of the processing? It's easy to say, let's buy a package and go, but there are some downsides and there are some snags that you will hit along the way. Number one, getting the wrong file. You're not looking at the current file, the live file, you're looking at last year's file, a copy of the file, one that we keep specially for the auditors. You need to know that you've got the right file in the first place. Getting the wrong layout. Looking at documentation that's out of date and testing for a condition that doesn't exist anymore. Prejudging the results and saying, I need to find this and I will keep looking until I find it. When I find it, I will stop. Rough rule of thumb, never believe what the first printout tells you, particularly if it's what you wanted to hear. Okay, some supplemental information for you. This is just simply a list of other information that you will get on the internet, and you can peruse them at your leisure. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to the end of what I was going to say today. Question now is, are there any questions? Don't be shy.
Well, I don't see any questions in the question box, Richard. So let me just thank you for a great session today on getting started in the basics with IDEA. I'll remind everybody that those of you that have signed up for the entire series, we have had a change in plans in terms of the way that you register for the webinars. If you signed up for the entire series of 12 webinars, you will have to register for each one. GoToWebinar will not allow us to have a group sign up, so that you can't sign up for all 12 of them with a single registration. On Thursday, we will be discussing importing data, the complete course in all file types and data tricks to get your data ready for analysis. And we have more sessions coming up. Richard has put the slide up with all of the sessions that are coming up. And just let me remind everyone that we do have another webinar that's closely related tomorrow on using Microsoft Excel in your next internal and external audit, learning the key process steps. We've got a great turnout for that, but we still have seats that are available. And Rich Lanza will be doing that webinar. So that's all that I have. Richard, do you have anything else that you want to say for the day? I know it's your dinner time and close to bedtime there.
Yeah, not only to say thank you for coming. I hope you found it useful. For those of you who are here for the whole series, unfortunately you've got me again on Thursday. For those who haven't signed up for the whole series, well, maybe you want to think about coming on Thursday.
Yeah, you still have a chance to sign up. We do have the registration open, so you can sign up for Thursday's session. You can sign up for the entire series. If you do miss any of the sessions, we do record all of the webinars, so you may not be able to get CPE if you're only viewing the recording, but at least you won't miss out on any of the material. And the files that we sent today, those files will be used throughout the coursework. So, again, thank you for coming today, and everybody have a great day. Bye.
Bye.